morning, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. So this morning, we're going to talk about Harvard University is suing Trump administration over its ban on foreign students, which is a policy that is threatening to upend higher education. Meanwhile, DC reels from a terror attack targeting Israeli embassy staff. Abroad, you have Ukraine and Russia, which is executing the largest prisoner swamp since their war had begun. While North Korea quietly suffers a very devastating warship disaster, the U.S. is also under fire for deporting people to war-torn South Sudan, which is risking lives and violating court orders. And of course, back here in America, Trump's new One Big Beautiful Bill is anything but beautiful for working Americans, which is slashing Medicaid and giving billions to the elites. So we're going to jump right into your news stories here this morning, but I wanted to make sure that you guys get a recap of some of the things we're going to update as well as go over. Now, with your first story, a somber two event unfolded in D.C. where two Israeli embassy staff members were fatally shot outside a outside a Jewish museum. And the victims, which was a young couple soon to be engaged, were targeted by a gunman who shouted "Free Palestine" during their attack. Authorities are investigating this as a target act of terrorism. Absolutely, I believe this was a target attack of terrorism because he went to a Jewish museum where he likely believed that the people who were in the museum, majority of them were probably Jewish, and essentially whoever was coming out at the time that he was targeting and planning and to execute this attack, he was going to unalive, unfortunately. And this is all due to the war, conflict, and battle between Hamas and Israel, but a lot of Palestinians have been unalive in this aftermath, okay, who has been, again, been a tragedy of a war that has killed over 40,000 people. And we're talking on both sides. So if you take into account the Jewish lives that were lost, if you take into account the Palestinian lives that were lost, we're talking roughly over 44,000 people who have perished because of this war. And to me, I think it's more daunting that people are being unalived for a war that is happening over 7,000 miles away from America. Why are people violently protesting? Why are people protesting around college campuses and around America in courtrooms? It's because America is funding a large part of this war by the way of Israel. Now, no matter your stance on this, I wonder when the UN is going to be more involved, NATO is going to get more involved, some of these groups from the G20 summit are going to be more involved. So again, we can render any sort of ceasefire or peace agreement that can save thousands of lives on both sides. Now, of course, in this regards, the aggressor at this current moment are the Israeli Defense Forces, whereas they're trying to sort out, unalive, and capture the Hamas terrorists. But unfortunately, in that wake, there have been a lot of innocent Palestinians who've been killed. So again, I'll try to keep you guys abreast of everything that's essentially going on with that. But unfortunately, that is the current state where people are going to, because again, even though we have people who've been unalive because of this, this great tragedy, I just wonder when will come to end to the war in the Middle East against all these different countries. I want to share this news clip with you guys very quickly so you guys can hear it. Give me 1 second.
Blooded political assassination.
Today, Elias Rodriguez is being described by authorities as a terrorist fueled by hate and anti-Semitism, charged with firearms violations and murdering foreign officials.
Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated, especially in the nation's capital. Now, we're going to continue to investigate this as a hate crime and a crime of terrorism.
And we're learning disturbing new details that the suspect had flown into the Washington area on Monday and checked a 9mm handgun in with his luggage. The FBI says he bought a ticket to the event being held at the D.C. Capitol Jewish Museum, his alleged target location. Is there
So I guess the only questions that I essentially have when it comes, again, to this terrorist attack, as they always are, when it comes to the government, they always state that anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. You know, in any part of America, she say for the nation's capital. Well, Palestinian people, okay, Palestine, Philistine, however you guys want to pronounce it, they are Semitic people as well. So is she referring just to Jewish people, or is she referring to Palestinian people as well? Here's another thing. I've really never heard anyone from any jurisdiction, city, state, ever say that anti-Black hate crimes will not be tolerated. I hear from other communities, I've heard when they had attacks on the Asian communities that anti-Asian hate will not be tolerated, but I've yet to hear anti-Black hate will not be tolerated from any of our government officials on a large stage, like from a city like DC. Not very large in landmass, but again, very important to our country as the nation's capital. But I never heard those same sentiments when it comes to Black people. Even though when you look at the FBI data, the CIA data, the Department of Justice data, Black people are the #1 group of people that hate crimes are committed the most against. And I'm not trying to make this a Black, Jewish, Palestine thing. I'm just looking at this in comparison. It's just a small comparison because I'll hear public figures come out and talk against hate of any other group on a national stage. So I think the comparisons are very relevant because we don't get that same energy. Now, let me talk about Harvard very quickly because the university argues that this move that Trump is doing is unconstitutional and retaliatory, impacting over 7,000 international students who play very pivotal roles in teaching, research, and sports. And the Department of Homeland Security justified the ban by accusing Harvard of fostering an unsafe campus and collaborating with the Chinese Communist Party. Harvard President Alan Gaber defends the university's principles and highlights the potential loss of global student applicants. Now, this is very contradictory of Harvard because the only reason why they're suing the Trump administration is because the Trump administration stopped all funding for Harvard. So they're stating because of the Trump administration cuts to Harvard's fund, that they no longer can garner the best talent around the world of their international students to come to Harvard. How are you suing the government that was giving you free money, taxpayer money, the money that you and I have been working for, because you cannot go around the world and pick the best out of their countries? I just wanted to kind of go over there once more because I'm not going to even go there because it's quite ridiculous that Harvard's doing that, which is one of the most influential, powerful schools, richest schools in America. Now, Ukraine and Russia have initiated the largest prisoner exchange since the onset of their conflict, with 1,000 soldiers and civilians expected to be released by each side. Now, this exchange marks the first tangible outcome from recent peace talks in Istanbul. However, the tensions remain high, with air raid sirens sounding as Ukrainian prisoners were transferred, and that's because Russia is still on the attack and the war is still ongoing. Even though this is kind of one of the first steps of a peace treaty being signed, and simultaneously the Ukrainians were still being bombed by the Russian attackers. So again, even though it looks as though we're getting closer, okay, it looks like we're getting closer to steps of peace, that doesn't mean that the war is yet over. Satellite images that you see here have revealed that a new Korean warship suffered very significant, very significant damage. And the vessel, partially submerged and covered with tarps, lies on its side at a shipyard in North Korea. And the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, has described the incident as a criminal act. And an official investigation is underway. I don't know what he means by that, because North Korea is a very closed country. North Korea is a very closed country. So the only thing I can think of is that he believes there are some South Korean spies who somehow sabotage his ship. Now, and again, a lot of people believe that North Korea is closed off and they have no resources and or support. Do not forget that North Korea is in bed with Russia, and Russia is in bed with India, and India and Russia are in bed with Africa. So again, they have connections to one of the largest resources in the world, and that's the continent of Africa. The continent of Africa is the richest continent in the world with the poorest people. And we understand, the constraints behind that because of colonialism, etc. And now economic colonialism by the way of the Chinese. I digress. That's definitely a larger topic for a different day. But nonetheless, they have connected resources. But they're stating, again, there's a criminal act here, and they're going to investigate this. They don't want to basically state that this was an accident, this was a food bar, so to speak. And a lot of people in building this or trying to get this sea ready made a lot of mistakes. No one is really talking about that. Again, they don't want to take ownership and responsibility of people making, they just want to outward cry that sabotage. There are some spies who came in and wrecked the shipyard, and we know that this is a criminal act, and we're going to go and search and find them. Again, I just think it's propaganda altogether. I really do think it's propaganda. Now, this was very shocking to me because I couldn't understand the Trump administration, the mindset and the thought process and the actions behind this right here. Are you guys looking at this? Because the U.S. government has come under scrutiny for deporting individuals, including those from countries like Vietnam, Myanmar. And don't forget, Myanmar is going through a civil war / genocide themselves. And South Sudan, they're going through a civil war and genocide themselves. But nonetheless, nations that, a lot of South Sudan is a nation that has been plagued by conflict and instability. And a federal judge has ruled that this action violates a court order, raising concerns about the safety and legality of such deportations. I mean, these people are not even native to the land. I want to see the reports from the president of South Sudan in accepting illegal immigrants from America that are not native born to Sudan. Now, out of all these pictures, you see one person, okay? Don't get me wrong. Sudanese people are more likely to look at, more likely to look like the gentleman in the top right corner of your screen. The black gentleman here. Sudanese people are usually tall. They're usually, especially the men, they're usually 6 feet or taller, slender in build, and they have a very, their skin color, their melanin is very rich, right? It's not their skin tone, I'm trying to explain it because, again, they have a very beautiful skin tone, but in some regards, depending on whether it's at night or it's in the day, they can almost look blue because it's so rich. Their melanin is so rich. In some regards, they can also look purple to a certain degree, but more blue than anything because they have such dark, rich melanin. And I've never heard of any reports like the gentleman in the middle. He may be from Venezuela, but he does look like a white man, but he's probably from Venezuela. And all these other gentlemen here that you see, Vietnam as well as Myanmar. And then the top left guy here and the guy right under the black gentleman looks as though they're probably from Venezuela. Okay, and the other gentlemen look Asian. But nonetheless, he's sending non-native people, non-native to Sudan. I'm very curious of why this occurred. Now, it states here that the foreign men convicted of crimes were placed on a deportation flight headed for the chaotic nation of South Sudan. Do not forget, South Sudan is at civil war. There's a genocide that's occurring over there, and you are deporting people to a very unstable country that do not identify with the language, that do not identify with the people. Now, it states here were originally from countries as far as Vietnam. They had lived in various places from California, Iowa, Nebraska to Florida, with one serving a sentence of nearly 30 years. They were accused of convicted crimes ranging from murder to rape, robbery, and assault. Despite their criminal records, a federal judge says that the White House violated a court order on deportations to third countries, adding these 8 migrants aboard the plane were not given a meaningful opportunity to object that the deportation could put them in danger. Absolutely. It goes on to state that no country on earth wanted to accept them because their crimes are so uniquely monstrous and barbaric, said Tricia McLaurin, a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security. So instead of keeping them in prison in America, they basically sent them to their death. They basically sent them to war. And it goes on to state at least one of the victims' family members has come out to oppose the way the deportation was conducted and the fact that her family wasn't notified, while saying she had hope the man will leave the United States. These are the migrants who are part of the deportation flight. And my only response to this is, why not just send them back to their country? If these are illegal migrants, no matter if their country wants to accept them or not, these are your citizens. These are your people. We're sending them back home, but they send them to a land that they have no affiliation, no cultural semblance, okay? No. In comparison, there's nothing that these gentlemen here have in common with the South Sudanese people. So, in my opinion, I believe they really sent them to their death or to an area where they may be tortured, okay? I just don't see a positive outcome for these gentlemen. For majority of these gentlemen, I do not see a positive outcome. And again, if you have people from other countries, they should be deported to their own country, okay? And let their own country deal with them. President Trump's new tax bill, dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill, promises financial relief through various tax cuts and incentives. Key provisions include permanent tax cuts from 2017, expanded child tax credits, and a new deductions. However, critics argue that these benefits are time limited and primarily favor wealthier Americans, with potential cuts to social programs like Medicaid and SNAP looming in the future. And we kind of went over this more in detail yesterday, and I really broke down a lot of key components of the One Big Beautiful Bill tax cuts, especially when it comes to Medicaid. They had this falsing environment of all these things. If you're under Medicaid that you had to do, that you had at least clock, I believe, 80 work hours a month. They had a lot of constraints, a lot of things you had to do in order to qualify Medicaid, even if you were below or above the poverty line in which they considered. And I popped up 10 very rich billionaires who have been profiting, okay, and the likes of Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, so on and so forth, have profited from President Trump being in office and signing legislation into office just like this. So again, bringing jobs back to America, bringing industries back to America, the rich is getting richer. The only question I believe that you guys may have next is the poor getting poorer? Because we haven't seen some of that wealth trickle down from the billionaires and reach the common man, the working man, blue collar, white collar. Because I don't even consider white collar the filthy rich. They just another echelon. And I'm not saying people who have built businesses, who structure their business by the way that the American government has allowed, that they shouldn't be rich. I'm not stating that. But if the rich is getting more filthy rich and inflation is still high, interest rate is still high, then what does the Trump administration plan to do in order for everyday working Americans to live a better life so they can upgrade their living status, so they can live a better life, so they can buy a better car, so they can essentially buy a house that's adequate for their family, so they can take a vacation once or twice a year. What are they doing to support the American people other than say we're bringing jobs back? We're going to put all the illegal immigrants, which I'm for. If they're illegal, they should not be in the country. But when we start to bring these American businesses back, are you training Americans and giving them the skills in order to work these jobs? Because who's going to fulfill all these jobs that America was not filling? All the construction jobs, all the nursing aid home jobs, the different certifications and skills that you need in order to do these jobs. Are you bringing back car manufacturers to Michigan, Detroit? Are you going to give these manufacturing jobs back to everyday working Americans? Who's going to fulfill the large gap in the construction when it comes to homes and commercial buildings? Have you incentivized Americans to send their children off to school to be contractors or to be laymen or to learn trade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So if you're not doing that, then where is this workforce coming from? Is it going to come from legal immigrants? Because do not forget, President Trump and Elon Musk state they have quite a few H-1B visa people on their staff. So it's not like we're still not gaining the quote unquote best talent from around the world, which have been debunked and proven untrue. Because a lot of these people that come over here do not have higher education, number one. And number two, do not have the trade and the skills. They learn how? On the job, usually from their own countrymen and women that already have those positions. Also, I want you guys' take on this video I'm about to show you guys, because this was in a suburban neighborhood, in a regular neighborhood, that these people started to film this interaction with this black lady and this little white girl with a dog. And I want you guys, I want to know your take on this. This wasn't on a movie set. This wasn't staged or anything like that. This is just someone walking a dog, black lady with a little white girl. But I want you to really keen in on the interaction and what the black woman is wearing. I think it's very daunting. I don't know what's going on here, but I do want your take.
What in the world?
Williamsburg has gone too far.
Wow. I hope they pay her. Like, I hope they pay her, because this is ridiculous.
Baby, you have to get some common
This
sense.
is crazy right here. I hope they paying her money's worth. God
It's been
damn.
on time. I think minimum wage is
God
gone up.
damn.
I checked on it this morning.
God damn.
Well, he doesn't get in on that side. Which side does he get in on?
See, your cot lady. What?
All right, now the lady seemed African. I'm just looking at her features. She could be a black American, but it seems as though she seems, when I'm looking at her facial features, and I can't see it that clearly, but she looks African. But it looks like she almost have on some very old 1800 slave-made attire. I hate to say it, but I want you guys to look at the little girl. She's dressed regular, and you know the area that they're in. There was a gentleman that was coming out the doorway there. I don't know if you saw the gentleman. He was wearing regular clothing. So as I was saying, this is not like on a movie set or anything like that. I'm just kind of working my way through here. I wanted you guys to see the gentleman.
I hope they pay her. Like, I hope they pay her, because this is ridiculous.
Baby, you have to get some common sense.
This is crazy right here. I hope they paying her money's worth. God
It's been
damn.
on time. I think minimum wage is gone
God.
up.
Again, there's a gentleman who walked out this building. Again, I don't think that's the home, but you see right here by the building up here, there's a gentleman walking out. There's no movie set, and he's just taping it because, again, there's a woman has some very questionable attire on. Why she seems to be the caregiver, someone who's babysitting it just looked very weird. Okay, but I want you guys' take on that. Nonetheless, you guys have a great and wonderful morning, and I see you guys on the next one. This is Blacklogic.